Rotarian. Oh. I am not Mark DeGroff, even though that's what it says I'm supposed to say here. He's home not feeling well, and I discovered that just as I walked in at the start of the meeting. So this is my orientation as president-elect, and I'm glad you're all standing and hanging in there. Shall we say the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Deborah Ritz will do our Rotary in it and guest introductions.
Good afternoon. I love this time of year because it's a great time for us to all remember how much we are blessed and so much that we have to be thankful for. But in remembering all that at this time of the year, it also makes me a little sad because I realize that I don't have to wait for Thanksgiving to be thankful or show my gratitude. So anyway, in hopes that this reading, I found a poem. This poem will resound with you like it does with me. I will read it to you. It's called Once Upon a Time. What if I read to you a story starting once upon a time, and you realized it was your life spelled out on every line? Would you hear my voice with wonder as it brushed across each word, and pray my arms had strength to hold the truth about your world? Would your view on life be different, and would it shock you most to find that the things you thought defined you could be summed up in just 2 lines, and all the ones you took for granted, the little ins and outs of every day, played a bigger part in who you are than you ever dared to say? Would you wonder at the pages left and all the places that they'll lead, then vow to make each moment one that you'd be proud to read? Because there is a story of your life, but it's you that holds the pen, and I hope you'll find the pages right before you reach the end. So just a little reminder that even though this time of year is very special, the things that we think about today can be emulated in our life all the time. So anyway, happy Thanksgiving to you all. And because you guys haven't had enough of me, I'm going to do guest introductions. So, Devayon Elrod, who's a guest of Lee Morris.
Hi, Dave.
We welcome Fred Willer, who is also the guest of Lee Morris.
Hi, Fred.
We welcome Matt Sharvat, the guest of Zach Ahrens.
Hi, Matt.
We welcome Randy Andrews, guest of Scott Griffith.
Hi, Randy.
We welcome Larry Calvary, guest of Eugene Williams.
Hi, Larry.
And we also welcome Bradley Franklin, guest of Chris Mickey.
Hi, Brad. Lady.
Welcome to all.
That's quite a group of guests. It's because of our speaker. The November featured charity is Kansas Children's Service League for the Restoration Education Program. Their mission is to protect and promote the well-being of children. Please be sure that you go online to the topekarotary.org for details and to see about meetings and things that are happening. We're trying to make an effort to have fewer announcements during the meeting so that you can have longer time to visit with your friends and other members, and so that will help us have shorter announcements. If you will go online, check that. The Mentoring Forward program, we're having the orientation session right after the meeting today.
Right over here. We'll be over in this corner.
over there in that corner. Thank you. And we have the 5th Thursday Club Social, November 29th, and the details will be forthcoming. Now, Curtis Needham will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Joni. Our speaker is a native of rural Milwaukee. He started his career as an accountant there, but he was drafted into the U.S. Army and served our country honorably over in Vietnam, earning a Purple Heart there. He then returned and obtained degrees from the University of Wisconsin and Oregon State University, where he earned his PhD in microbiophysiology. He has been with Kansas State University since 1994, and he currently serves as the full-time liaison to the National Bio and Agro-Defense Facility, or NBAF. He's been in that role since 2014, and in that role, it's his job to work with the president of Kansas State and other agencies to leverage opportunities focused on protecting U.S. agriculture, crops, livestock, food, and people. Will you please welcome Dr. Ron Trewyn.
Thank you. Look forward to this, and I've actually got a couple of slides, and I brought some stuff up to remind me to point out a couple of Topeka relevant parts of the talk, and we'll do a test and see how many of you are familiar with some of this stuff. All right, try to give you a little bit of background on the facility, why it's important, why it has been due for a long time to have a facility like this. Talk just a little bit about how Kansas won this, and then there'll be a lot of pictures going on, so those I'll get through fairly quickly, but we'll take a little more time on the front end. This shows an aerial view, an artist rendering of what it will look like. The sort of layout of the lots, the 46.828 acres is shown down in the lower left. And the Biosecurity Research Institute at Pat Roberts Hall is shown in the foreground. It sits right next to it. It is a biocontainment facility that we have on campus where we've actually just started NBAF research already, and I'll touch on that just a little bit as we go forward. It had a lot to do with why we won, I believe, in Kansas. Mission: to protect U.S. livestock from foreign animal diseases, including zoonotic diseases, those that spread from animals to people. So this is not just about animal health, it's also about public health. And that's kind of a big deal. If you can stop the spread of a zoonotic disease in the animal host, it's going to do a lot to protect people as well. So it's not just the food and agriculture part. The likely diseases, it could change by the time the facility opens, but the animal-only threats shown up there: African swine fever, classical swine fever, foot and mouth disease, and others to be determined. On the zoonotic list, Rift Valley fever, Japanese encephalitis, Nipah virus, and recently added Ebola virus. The reason Ebola was added, in 2008, Ebola virus was found in pigs in the Philippines. It happened to be a strain of Ebola that was not zoonotic, so it didn't spread to people, didn't kill people. They may have still contracted it, but it didn't kill them. But the question is, the Ebola virus that's in Africa, the Sudan strain, the Zaire strain, would pigs serve as a reservoir for those if that virus ever got here? That's something to be concerned about, something that we need to know about. So the last two diseases on there, Nipah and Ebola, are what are called class 4, level 4. All of the others, there's some sort of a treatment, a vaccine, some treatment you can do for these. For a zoonotic disease for which there's no treatment, you have to wear the spacesuits to work on this stuff safely. There is no other livestock facility in this country currently where you can do that. NBAF will be the first. There is a facility like that in the UK, there's one in Australia, a new one in Germany, and a very small one up in Winnipeg, Canada. But this country has no such facility, so it's kind of urgent to get that in place. A little transition slide here. There are a few people in the audience who might be old enough to remember the person that's going to show up down in the corner here, Ayn Rand. This is one of the best quotes I've ever heard. You can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality. Obviously, that's appreciated here. I love that quote, and part of this is we have been avoiding the reality of these diseases for a long time. We've needed a new facility like this for a very, very long time, and it's finally coming, so that's why it's kind of a big deal. This just shows, and this is not a real recent slide, but it just shows natural disease outbreak only of regulated pathogens, pathogens that the CDC and USDA regulate in this country. There are others out there. Natural disease outbreaks in less than a 2-year period, over 22 months. The point of this is, and the ones with stars are those NVAF diseases I just mentioned. You look at the numbers up there, the number of natural disease outbreaks, just through the movement of people and goods, these things are going to get here. We need this sort of a facility to help protect, to get these new vaccines, new detection technologies, etc. So it's really important. There is another reason, though, that's even more important. This list up in the left-hand corner was found in a cave in Afghanistan in 2002 by Navy SEALs, listing pathogens Al-Qaeda was working on intending to bring here. 6 of them targeting humans, 6 of them livestock, poultry, 4 of them crops. Our current president of K-State, General Myers, when he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, 2001 to 2005, says that not only was familiar with this, he actually saw photos of them experimenting on animals with some of these. This was not sort of hypothetical. This was a real possibility, still is today, and I'll have one more slide. This, importantly enough, there's a Topeka relevance here. Do you know what else they found in a cave in Afghanistan? I'm not sure it was this cave, but back at that time frame, the building plans for the National Guard Armory here in Topeka. You ever wonder about that big anti-tank fence around it that seems more massive than you would need in Topeka? That's the reason. Why they had the plans to that in a cave in Afghanistan, I don't know. But it was something that, there were a lot of other things found there, but I thought that a little bit of history might not be comforting, but at least, you know, relevant. To say this is not just old information, though, this next one, this is a poster, an ISIS poster from earlier this year with San Francisco in the skyline behind it proposing bioattacks on the U.S. ISIS has worked on some of this stuff. Back in 2013, 2014, when it was the big outbreak of Ebola in West Africa, ISIS was trying to figure out how they could infect some prisoners they had and turn them loose. Folks, like it or not, they think about these things out there. So this stuff is very relevant. Just a little bit on how we managed to hit the bullseye, I think, and win NVAF coming here. Another cute little thing, by failing to prepare, you prepare to fail. So Kansas has been working on this a long time. And I can just tell you, back in 1999, Kansas State University put out this little 100-pager here called Homeland Defense, Food Safety, Security, and Emergency Preparedness. We were looking at these sorts of issues back all the way back then on how to prepare the country. We're calling for the biocontainment facility to work on it. It's how we got the Biosecurity Research Institute at Pat Roberts Hall. And this is a little image showing the inside, some inside shots of the building and outside. As opposed to NVAF. NVAF will work strictly on livestock. We have that capability in 5 animal rooms we have in the facility where in those 5 rooms we could hold up to 30 head of cattle, many more pigs, sheep, goats. We've done poultry work in there, all sorts of things. So these vessels are basically safe. You have to have the people protected. And I'll talk a little bit more about a couple of those examples here in a minute. But we also work on crop threats in our building and food threats. So we can work on food processing issues and have in the building done work for the Department of Army on how to, making sure they can, that the food they acquire around the world is safe and whatnot. So our facility actually has a little more breadth in what we can do. We have 5 of these biosafety level 3 ag rooms for livestock. NVAF will have 46 of those. So they are going to be able to do a lot of this work and much more than we can, but plenty of work to go around. All right. Basically, what's shown up here is in 2013 we started working on Rift Valley fever, one of the zoonotic diseases. 2014, Japanese encephalitis. Having to get all the federal permits and whatnot. We are the first non-federal building that's been approved to work on African swine fever and classical swine fever. If you've been following the news, there are huge problems with African swine fever in Europe. It's been in Russia for a while. It just got into China, where half of the world's population of pigs live. And African swine fever can kill 100%. There was someone from China that recently got off an airplane in Japan and had some homemade sausage in his luggage he was trying to smuggle in. It tested positive for African swine fever. So some of the stuff that needs to go on to make sure this stuff doesn't get into this country and whatnot and elsewhere is a complex situation, a complex issue. This is another Topeka issue. There's a biothreat team that works here. The Kansas Intelligence Fusion Center here at the National Guard Armory is the only fusion center of, I think there are 79 of them currently across the country. It is the only one that has a biothreat team looking over the horizon at problems that could be coming from elsewhere around the world. Most of the other fusion centers focus on law enforcement issues. They do that, but they're actually trying here to prevent attacks. So they have a biothreat team, they have a cybersecurity team. It is probably the leading fusion center in the country, and it's why lots of federal folks, when they come here, they visit specifically the fusion center to find out what's going on. Those sorts of issues are going to be critically important for NBAF coming. Another reason why we want. They cover all the ag threats, so we have experts that work there that come there periodically on plant diseases, animal diseases, vector-borne diseases. We have folks from the medical school that are out here. KU Hospital was basically commended by the CDC director during the time that Ebola got to this country. The biothreat team, their epidemiologist, had actually predicted months and months in advance the month that it would arrive in the U.S. to the month. He picked the exact month it would get here. KU Med was better prepared and made renovations for about a fifth the cost of anywhere else in the country on getting their facilities ready in case it showed up here. So lots of good stuff going on. The other little thing that I wanted to point out that folks in Topeka should be really proud of, it is an exceptional capability and critically important to protect the country. All right, now I'm just going to run through lots of photographs so we can go through these fairly quickly because I want to make sure we've got enough time to hopefully answer your questions. And I love this one from Winston Churchill. However beautiful the strategy, you should occasionally look at the results. Folks should do that more in Washington a lot. I'm sure that's not an issue with state government. Anyhow, this shows a flyover of the site, and sort of the yellow lines I put in there shows the BRI in the foreground, which was already there in 2009 when the Kansas site was selected. You can sort of see there were animal facilities on the site. The West Star substation that's sitting there, it's still there inside the fence, and so anybody working for West Star actually has to go through Homeland Security and all the background checks to actually go in there. That is the primary electrical feed for the BRI. It will be for NBAF, is for what's already done at NBAF. There's another substation about 1.5 miles away that will be the secondary feed, and then you have emergency generators to take over, as we have at the BRIs. They have in the central utility plant for NBAF that's already done. There was an old feed mill that sat there. Some of you remember that sitting on the corner, an old rust bucket. I was not there when they knocked down the last of it, but the people that were said the rats that came out of the foundation had to weigh between 15 and 20 pounds. In Vietnam, I saw rats that big. They could get that big. I mean, big as a small dog. They were kind of vicious over there. Not sure about these, but I tell people in that area, you might keep your eye out around meadowlark and stuff. They could be running around on you. Just a little aside to encourage folks. This runs through the basic timeline that's things that have happened so far and where things are. So our facilities were off the site in 2010. The construction manager was already on site in 2010, so they picked a construction manager at the very beginning that's been on site since then. There was no single firm in the country big enough to bid on it themselves, so there were pairs of entities that bid. McCarthy out of St. Louis and Mortensen out of Minneapolis, their joint venture was the winner for this. So they had to have expertise building biocontainment level 4 facilities, so the spacesuit types. There aren't many like that. They also had to put up a $525 million bond. If it doesn't work at the end, they're out that. Not every construction company can do a $525 million bond by themselves. So I think you agree with that one.
Yes, I would agree.
Anyhow, they've been on site. So site prep went on, completed in 2012. The land transfer did not actually occur until after the site prep, so we still owned the land. And it was actually Kansas money that paid for the site prep, but there was federal money going in to build a central utility plant. Federal government had to own it. I can tell you, as a fact, the land transfer was signed at 4:25 p.m. on December 28th, 2012. Why do I know that? Well, had it not happened by December 31st, the whole project was going to tank. Between the 20th and the 28th, the only day I did not either get a phone call, a text message, or an email from Homeland Security in Washington for me to go check something at the courthouse was December 26th. Christmas morning, I had a message, go check. I said, I'm not finding anybody there this morning, but went down the next day. We had a few hurdles that we cleared along the way. The Central Utility Plant, $80 million project, was started in 2013, feed mill removed. Finally, the last of the federal money came in 2015, and there was actually more Kansas money added in to this $1.25 billion project. So in the end, it was 920-some million of federal money and 307 of state money, along with $5 million from the city of Manhattan to make up that $1.25 billion. We couldn't start, the feds, the construction company, couldn't start until all the money was in the bank, and these were guaranteed maximum price contracts, so, and they're on time and on budget, have been on all of these parts of the project. Central Utility Plant completed, remaining to be done, the things shown in red. So 5-year construction time for the main lab. They poured concrete for 2.5 years just for the main lab. More steel went into it than I've ever seen in anything in it and around it, as I will show you. This shows the 43-foot hole in the ground for digging out for constructing the main lab. A couple of things that you probably can't see from the back that I've highlighted on here. The boilers on the second floor came from Hutchinson. The cooling towers shown on the outside of the building came from Olathe. Roughly 65% of the $80 million that went into constructing the Central Utility Plant were spent in Kansas or the Kansas City area. So some of the construction companies and whatnot spanned over into Missouri, but 65%. The last numbers I saw for the $100 and some thousand dollars for the main lab, just under 50% is being spent in Kansas. A lot of the specialized equipment for the lab has to be acquired elsewhere, but they've worked hard to make sure that they're spending as much money as they can in state. And I was told by somebody in state government, by the time the construction is done, all of the money the state has put in will be paid back in the state, 307. So before they start operating the facility. Currently, there are about 700 to 800 construction workers on site per day, so lots of folks working this. Now I'm just going to run through a bunch of pictures. So just to show you a lot of the below ground work that was going on in 2016. Jump forward a year, they were finishing the first floor on the one end of the building where the diagnostic work is going to be. The other side of the building, closer to the Central Utility Plant, is where the animal rooms and stuff are going to be. So that's sort of behind the other part, construction-wise. But again, up to July, second floor, working on the third floor above ground for this, so really moving along. Now I'm going to spend a little time on this one and the next slide. See all that steel going around it? That is actually, so while there's a massive amount of steel that went inside rebar, that went inside all of the pylons, everything they were doing in the construction phase. The laboratory part of the facility is the steel is thick steel, reinforced steel, going around it. So basically, this facility, as I will show on the next slide, exceeds the standards for a nuclear power plant. What that means is if an EF5 tornado picks up a 4,000-pound vehicle and hurls it into the side of the building at 100 miles an hour, it won't penetrate. It won't dent it. It'll dent the outside because they're putting stuff over it, covering the steel. But this is one solid facility all the way up over the top. So it added a few $100 million to the cost when they opted to do that. The towers, 2 of them went down in November of last year, then another one in February of this year, one in April. So I'll just show a couple more shots here. This shows a schematic of basically the layout of the lab. The biosafety level 4, the spacesuit type stuff, is in the middle of the facility, furthest from the outside. There is a pressure gradient of air that will go across this, as I mentioned before lunch. In our building, which is much, much smaller, the BRI, we move 5.4 million cubic feet of air per hour through it. Pressure gradient that moves from the outside of the building to the inside. The air is filtered coming in, it's double filtered going out. Some of these filter units are from here to that back wall. They're monstrous. These things, these are safe facilities. The redundancies in these facilities are amazing. That's why you put the 4 level in the very middle of the building in case something does penetrate the outside. You wouldn't want to stay in the offices if that tornado is coming your way, or in the biotechnology development module out front. That's basically a vaccine pilot plant, so they can sort of work on scaling up vaccine production, working with the animal health companies here in the animal health corridor on getting those technologies out the door for new vaccines and the like. As you see, 580,000 square feet just for the whole lab, 178,000 for the laboratory component. The stuff that goes in here, all the waste handling in the basement, not a trivial amount of stuff that has to be treated, getting out. Then all the air handling that goes out. I think there's actually over 1,000 of these monstrous HEPA filters in NBAF. We have 160 some in our building. But these filtration units then all have to be deconned and whatnot, changed out periodically so nothing gets through them. Complex facilities. All right, and see here in April of this year, the last of the tower cranes was down. You see they're covering the outside of that steel work and whatnot. And I'll just run through a few more photos here to finish up. Shows a flyover, and that original schematic there, that artist rendering, is down in the left-hand corner, because if you sort of look at that and then compare it to what I'm going to circle up there on the top, it's actually starting to look like the original artist rendering. If you're wondering, that little building down in the left-hand corner up there, that's sort of the welcome center, not for people walking off the streets, but visiting scientists and stuff to be cleared going in. There is a water feature next to that goes down from the lab and runs down. The first 2 times the lead architect presented at the BRI about where they were on their design, he said, the reason we're putting in this water feature is so people currently working at Plum Island will feel at home when they get here. Considering they have to take a ferry from Long Island 1.5 miles, or one from Connecticut 7 miles to get to it, I don't think water trickling down the way is going to quite feel like that. But there may be security things that are involved in that, so anyhow, why they're doing it. But this shows a shot from Bill Snyder Stadium, Family Stadium, taken back in September. Again, highlighting, and I'll see if I can get the red. Yeah, so the Welcome Center here, that water feature will be here. The offices up in here, Biotechnology Development Module. BRI, that's the generators for the BRI. It sits right here. Central Utility Plant over here. Kansas Department of Agriculture back here. There were probably people in Topeka not happy when they moved out to Manhattan. I can just tell you, I've been working on trying to get that done since, I don't know, almost 18 years. I happened to visit the University of New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, New Mexico a number of years ago. Their Department of Agriculture for the state is right there on their campus. And the synergies you get from your College of Agriculture working with the Department of Agriculture, it's actually a money saver. You can share positions. It's great now that they're right there with all of the other assets. So hopefully you've gotten past that. Aren't too upsetting. Shot that I took 2 days ago. I periodically just stand across the fence in the Agriculture Department's parking lot with my cell phone and take pictures. Had a security guard once ask me if I had permission to do that, and I pointed out to him I'm standing on public property and there isn't anything blocking my view, and so unless you put something up that I can't see, I don't think you can do anything about it. And he didn't. Also, what's currently under construction, so this is down on this end. They're the shipping and receiving dock, which they hadn't really worked on at all. So trans-shipping is what the feds are calling it, but it's where they will receive animals, they'll receive supplies, so the trucks that are inside the fence will never leave from inside the fence. They unload things there, move animals and whatnot in, and only healthy animals come into the facility to basically test. And I know for those who love animals, as I do, it is something you have to do to validate that these things work. Something I didn't know until working with some of our vector people. A vector-borne disease, the spread of the disease in the animal is much more aggressive, occurs much more quickly when delivered by the vector than if they're injected. So anyhow, with that, I am going to wrap up and say that I'm done, and I think on time. Close, anyhow. So, I would recommend, it'll show up on the bottom, that website that's down there, go on the website and check the 5-minute fly-through video that was done by one of the 5 architectural firms. It's really very good. It was done in 2011, so it's out of date, some of it, but it's really good. Also, there's another video on there that's really good to check. Yes, sir?
What, 2 questions. The average professional salary there, and what professionals are going to be employed there? What kind of occupations?
There'll be a lot of PhDs, so animal science, microbiologists, people, virologists, so and DVMs, so veterinarians and whatnot. So the scientific staff, the focus will be there. But out of the 350 to 400, that's there's a good number of them. But there will be office workers, there will be, mechanics, there will be engineers. The engineering in these buildings is unreal. And you really need quality folks doing that. So technicians, animal care people, it will be a whole spectrum, security specialists and all that. So a wide range of individuals, and we do expect companies will come to the area because of it.
You're able to attract all the people with the credentials and the skills and knowledge that you need. Is there a problem with filling all these positions?
Will there be a problem filling the positions? It's one of the reasons, sir, that we actually are starting to doing some of the work in our building. We have students and postdocs working on these projects in the building right now, in our building. Okay, and the federal government is actually now sponsoring fellowships at K-State. We had 5 new students start this year, specifically with the federal government paying them, where they will have to put in at least 6 to 7 years at NBAF afterwards. So they are trying to train up. They're working with the community college and the technical school in our community for some of the staffing that they will need. They're working with us on that. So there will be a lot of employment needs. Not a lot of people will be moving from Plum Island, New York here, but some will. So, but they need to fill a lot of positions. Only U.S. nationals. They will not allow foreign nationals in the building. You have to track their backgrounds and credentials enough. Yes, sir.
What did the overall construction cost end up?
$1.25 billion. That's design and construction. So the 5 architectural firms went together to do the design for it. So from there, and that $1.25 billion covers through commissioning. As I mentioned to someone here, when we were commissioning our building, air handling got out of whack. It sucked the sheetrock off the ceilings and walls of some of the offices. So these things are complex. You have to get it right. Every year we have to validate that everything is working right, though.
Last question.
All right.
What happens to Plum Island?
What happens to Plum Island? The Government Services Administration, whatever GSA stands for these days, are supposedly going to sell it. I saw an article, this goes back prior, a few years ago, when that first was announced that they were going to do it. There was someone in New York who offered to buy it, and I don't think he would do that now based on the office he's occupying in Washington. But
Don't put him fast.
Steve?
You mentioned the animal health corridor.
Yep.
Can you tell us just a little bit more about what that is and who's in it?
basically, the major portion of the animal health companies in the world reside between Columbia, Missouri, and Manhattan, Kansas, if you include up to St. Joe. I saw some numbers from 2014, I don't have newer ones, where 57% of the world's revenues for animal health come to this region. And so that was another reason, with all those animal health companies, that having the ability to roll technologies out to them, that also helped in the selection process. So it is a big deal for this region, and something that I think will continue to grow with probably more entities. Not everybody needs to be in Manhattan. Some could wind up in Topeka. They could wind up in the region. So.
Ron, we have a tradition in our club that our guest speaker gets to sign a book that we give to one of the elementary schools. This one is Junie B., first grader, Turkeys We Have Loved and Eaten.
Beef would be better, but I am signing in purple ink.
And then,
Just my name.
that would be great. We have, Rotarians have a 4-way test, and we're giving you a 4-way test coin for you to carry or to pass on to someone else.
Thank you very much.
Next week's meeting is in each of your own homes for Thanksgiving. The week after that is at the Capitol Plaza Emerald Ballroom. And I'm really excited about this. It is on human trafficking with Patty Millard. And as you know, we have a joint district grant with South Rotary to put together Fresh Start bags for women who have been trafficked. And she will be sharing that story with us. So I think it'll be pretty exciting. Guests, come back. We'd love to have you. And Deborah, thank you for your Thanksgiving poem, and happy Thanksgiving to all of you.
All those who've signed up for the mentoring program, we are going to meet right over in this area immediately afterward to get some information written. We'll move on. If you're interested and didn't sign up, please feel free to come on over and learn at this point. We're going to move forward fairly quickly from this point. We're going to be assigning people with students within the next few weeks. So if you're interested in the mentoring program, please stay and meet with us for a few minutes.
Okay, shall we end with the 4-way test?
Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And will it be fun?